Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Baker Institute at Rice University. I am Edward Jeredjian, the director of the James A. Baker III Institute for Public Policy here at the University of Rice. On November 14th, 2001, here at the Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University, Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation, outlined his vision for his country's future. He conveyed Russia's strong wish for forging stronger relations with the United States and with United States businesses, and welcomed increased foreign investment in Russia. President Putin pointed to the common interests of Russia and the United States, particularly in the energy and the space industries, which have a very important presence here in Houston. He said the scope for possible cooperation in the exploitation of Russian oil and gas could keep us busy for decades. He pointed out that Russia continues to be a reliable and predictable partner as a supplier of world oil and other natural resources. Indeed, the issue of diversity of the supply of oil and gas is a strategic one in terms of world security. Accordingly, this U.S.-Russia Commercial Energy Summit could not be more timely and flows from the summit meeting between President Bush and President Putin in May. We at the Baker Institute are honored to participate in hosting this important gathering of energy executives and government officials from Russia and the United States to discuss energy issues and the prospects for cooperation at this particularly important juncture in world affairs. Our Baker Institute Energy Forum and Studies have underscored the importance of diversity and of supply and energy security. This summit, I am confident, will make a meaningful contribution to achieving that strategic objective. It is now my pleasure to welcome the Honorable Don Evans, the Secretary of Commerce, Spencer Abraham, the Secretary of Energy, German Gref, Russia's Minister of Economic Development and Trade, and Igor Yusupov, the Minister of Energy of Russia. They will be in turn introduced when they make their keynote remarks. We have here represented many members, participants and representatives of United States oil and energy companies, who also contribute to our Energy Forum at the Baker Institute. I also note that there will be here, if they're not here now, Ambassador Sandy Vershbow, our ambassador to Russia, and Ambassador Yuri Yushakov, the Russian ambassador to the United States. And also I believe that Gene Lawson, the president of the U.S.-Russia Business Council, will likely be in the audience. It's now my particular pleasure to introduce John Rice, the chairman of the United States Energy Association, who needs to be, his hard work in putting this event together is commendable. And the logistics of putting this together, I thank you very much, John, for all the work that went into putting this together. And the staffers of the Department of Energy, the Department of Commerce, and my own staff here at the Baker Institute. So please join me now, John Rice, to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you for that warm introduction. The Honorable Donald L. Evans, the Honorable German O. Gref, the Honorable Igor K. Yusupov, the Honorable Spencer Abraham, distinguished ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed an honor and a pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all of you to this U.S.-Russia Commercial Energy Summit. Thank you, Ambassador Jeredjian, for welcoming us to the James A. Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University. We look forward to Secretary Baker joining us tomorrow for the closing plenary. Ladies and gentlemen, this is indeed a historic time in the lives of two great nations in pursuit of important goals. The personal bonds that we create and the business relationships that flow from these 2 days will serve our citizens for decades to come. We have a tremendous number of issues to discuss, both government to government and business to business. Today and tomorrow, we begin each day with major addresses that are followed by breakout sessions that will provide an opportunity for dialogue. To begin, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the Honorable Donald L. Evans, the Secretary of Commerce of the United States of America. Secretary Evans was appointed to serve as the 34th Secretary of Commerce by President George W. Bush. Secretary Evans brings to his position a very relevant business perspective, having been in the oil business himself. The Secretary started as a roughneck on a drilling rig and ultimately became Chief Executive Officer of Tom Brown, a domestic oil producer. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Donald L. Evans.
Good morning, everyone. John, thank you so much for that kind introduction. Welcome to all of you. This is exciting. Look in this crowd and see so many friendly faces, friends of mine, some faces that I'm not that familiar with. We welcome you. This is a historic event. It's a historic couple of days. I want to begin, before I get into my remarks, I've got a letter from the Vice President I would like to read, and so that you have a chance to hear his perspective and his words about how important and historic this event indeed is. To the delegates of the U.S.-Russia Commercial Energy Summit, welcome to the U.S.-Russia Commercial Energy Summit. I applaud your participation and look forward to hearing of your successful meetings. In May, President Putin and President Bush announced a new energy dialogue between Russia and the United States to strengthen our overall relationship and to enhance global energy security and international strategic stability. This summit provides an historic opportunity for our countries to 1. Develop bilateral cooperation in the energy sphere of mutually beneficial basis in accordance with our respective national energy policies. Reduce volatility and enhance predictability of global energy markets and reliability of global energy supply. Facilitate commercial cooperation in the energy sector and enhance interaction between our companies. Encourage investment aimed at the further development and modernization of fuel and the energy sector of Russia. Promote access to world markets for Russia energy. Foster science, technology, and business cooperation in the use of environmentally clean technologies. This summit also provides an opportunity for substantive dialogue that will further investment between our two countries and a venue for U.S. and Russia companies to explore partnering opportunities in the United States or Russia. I wish you every success in your meetings. Dick Cheney. This will be a tremendous opportunity for our two nations to come together, to look for opportunities to add to the quality of life of our fellow citizens, and yes, add to the global supply of energy. Again, I want to thank all of you for coming. I see some faces that were at the Houston Museum of Science last night, which is a fabulous facility. I hope you all enjoyed that, those that had the chance to participate and see that wonderful museum. I also want to thank the business leaders that are here, the government leaders that are here. I know many of you have traveled halfway around the world to be at this summit, and we appreciate that. Texas welcomes you. In fact, before coming down here, I talked to one of my good friends from Crawford, Texas, President George W. Bush. He said for all of us to work hard to get a lot done, but don't leave Houston, Texas without enjoying a little Texas hospitality. And I hope that you feel that way when you leave this city in a couple of days. I also want to acknowledge my co-chairs and Secretary of Energy Spence Abraham and Minister of Economic Development and Trade from Russia, Herman Gref, Minister of Energy from Russia, Igor Yusupov. Thank you so much for being a part of this and helping bring all this together. Thank you for all of your people and the role they played in bringing this together. John, thank you also, and Baker Institute for hosting us. It's a wonderful facility. I came down here not too long ago and talked to Secretary Baker about hosting it, and he was thrilled to have the opportunity to do this. This summit will focus on oil and gas, and it will focus on the importance of the global energy picture as well as policies and commercial opportunities between our two countries. Future summits, and we will have future summits, will focus on other areas of energy like electricity and energy efficiency. The timing of this summit could not be better. There are a lot of exciting things happening in the energy relationship between the United States and Russia. We're witnessing new projects and partnerships being developed. We're welcoming each other's presence in our respective energy sectors. We've seen Russia crude arrive right here at the Port of Houston and work its way into the American economy and into American automobiles. We're seeing how reforms can improve company performance and value. We're watching you apply amazing cutting-edge technology that protect the environment while exploring and developing the resources that are so critical to global economic growth. We're also watching the building of additional infrastructure with plans for even more that will allow for the expansion of supply and delivery of oil and gas into the global marketplace. And all of this enhances global energy security, global energy diversity, and global energy stability, goals that both of our nations share. Energy security is one of the greatest challenges we face today. It's the most important reason for this summit that we're holding. In fact, it was recognized as one of the top priorities of President Bush's national energy policy that was released last year. Ms. Spence and I had the opportunity to work on. Economic growth and stability around the world rely on, count on, a dependable and reliable and affordable source of energy. Without it, economics and economies cannot prosper as they should. They cannot provide what people need in this world, a better quality of life, good schools, good jobs. The United States and Russia play a pivotal role in the global energy markets. America is both the largest producer and the largest consumer in the world. It is also the world's largest net importer of energy. Russia is uniquely well positioned, as well as the world's third largest energy consumer, but is also one of the world's largest energy exporters. For example, it is second only to Saudi Arabia in terms of oil exports. And in terms of natural gas, Russia is blessed with the world's largest natural reserves in the world and is the world's largest exporter of natural gas. So it's important that we're here together today. Both our countries have well-established energy industries, and both are doing more and more business together. We're further developing our economic partnership, and that's key to strengthening our strategic partnership. President Bush and President Putin recognized this when they first met in Slovenia over a year ago. They created a new dialogue to get more American and Russian businesses involved in bilateral discussions. There have been many significant developments since then. For example, we support Russia's effort to join the World Trade Organization, which would greatly benefit not only Russia but the entire world trading community. The administration is also working hard with the U.S. Congress to graduate Russia from the provision of the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. The Department of Commerce decision in June recognized Russia as a market-based economy, what you recognized some time ago, that Russia's economic reforms and investment climate improvements have entered a new phase. Market economy status is an important step that will lead to expanded trade and investment for Russia. When President Putin and President Bush met in Moscow in May of this year, they agreed to begin an important new dialogue on energy issues, which led to this summit. So as we begin these meetings, we are truly breaking new ground. We're laying the foundation for even closer economic ties and economic partnership. And that will make for an even stronger friendship. When it comes to energy, we have mutual interests. Both our industries are seeking new opportunities. Both see the benefit of doing more business together. We want to create jobs for our citizens and improve their standard of living. So it is our charge this week, each and every one of us, to figure out the kinds of policies and practices that we need to encourage and to implement in order to achieve our mutual goals. We must create the operating environment that will allow businesses to cooperate and thrive so that they can achieve the important task of meeting significant increase that is expected in global energy demand in the years ahead. Now, how do we get there? And where do we start? Well, we need to highlight Russia's progress on the tax and legal reforms, such as recent progress in the Duma on the production sharing agreement legislation. This important legislation needs to be passed soon so there can be certainty in the Russian oil and gas investment climate. We also need to discuss what additional reforms and policy decisions are required to attract greater investment and to foster new partnerships between our country's energy companies. There is certainly potential. For example, it is projected that the Russia oil sector will need $10 billion a year or more in order to further increase its production. And just to maintain current levels of production of natural gas in Russia, it is expected that about $8 billion a year will be required. Over the next 2 days, we'll have a chance to listen to government and industry leaders provide insight into the U.S.-Russia energy relationship. In addition to the plenary sessions, we set up 10 breakout sessions. Each will cover a key aspect of the business at hand. There will be sessions dealing with both commercial and government financing, which we all know is one of the toughest hurdles to overcome. Another session will be devoted to evolving investment framework in Russia. And there will be a roundtable discussion to examine the human capital side of things. We have invited several prominent academic institutions to participate, and they will discuss expanding education and training initiatives between our countries, because there is no better way to nurture our future leaders than to provide them with the quality of education and modern training techniques. Other sessions will allow us to talk about commercial opportunities in oil and gas, as well as 21st century technology in energy. We will highlight cutting-edge technologies to promote efficiency and protect environment and boost production, all at the same time. Of course, one of the primary reasons we're at this summit was to provide opportunities for matchmaking between U.S. companies and Russian companies, because no matter what policies we make, no matter what trade barriers we tear down, at the end of the day, it is up to the private sector to make it work. Governments can create the right environment, and we can help create the right conditions, but we don't make the deals. We don't take the risks. We don't create the wealth. We don't create the prosperity. We don't create the jobs, and we don't write the checks. Private industry does all of that. The workers of our respective countries do that. You business leaders do that. And I know you take this responsibility seriously because it is your job. That's why we're recommending the creation of a U.S.-Russia Commercial Energy Working Group. It will be a forum where U.S. and Russian companies can speak to each other directly, to identify barriers and to recommend ways to expand energy trade and investment opportunities. We want and need your input. It is vital if we are going to strengthen the commercial relationship between our great nations. Because when you think about it, when you look over history, the free enterprise system has been a powerful tool for change. It has driven economic growth and the cause of freedom around the globe. And it has provided opportunity, hope, and stability for literally billions of people on this planet. So I believe that it will be a productive first summit. It will strengthen the relationship between our countries and will lead to new friendships and business opportunities, and will set the stage for a more stable and secure energy market. I look forward to our meetings together and planning for the future. And again, thank all of you for coming. It is now my honor and pleasure to turn this podium over to a great friend of mine, a friend I've developed over the last 14 months, somebody I've worked very closely with in developing the economic partnership between our two countries, the Minister of Economic Development and Trade for Russia, Minister German Gref. Thank you all.
Большое спасибо, Дон. Большое спасибо организаторам, огромное спасибо господину Райс, огромное спасибо этому городу, его мэру. Мы уже с первых шагов ощутили на себе гостеприимство и заботу и наших американских коллег и
American colleagues and the city of Houston
который производит совершенно
that provide quite a different impression from what we had expected when flying here. At the first glance, when we looked at the land here from the aircraft, we saw that the landscapes looked much like in Russia and Siberia, and not like prairies. When yesterday I was amazed, not all of my colleagues, I think, have already familiarized themselves with it. When Don was showing to me from the window of the hotel the Houston Medical Center, he asked me about 6 times. It was one of the buildings first, then I thought it is 2 buildings, very beautiful buildings with a lot of lights, and then finally he explained to me that this entire area in the downtown section is the medical center, and this was one of the strongest impressions I got of this city. There are a lot of major medical centers in Moscow, and I always thought that they are very large. And now I see that there is no place anywhere else that would replicate this one. So I am very grateful to the organizers. This is a top-notch organization, and we feel a lot of hospitality here. Thank you for this atmosphere. The second thing that I wanted to tell you about is that, much the same way as my colleague, I have to tell you on behalf of the Russian government and the President that we pay a lot of attention to this beginning dialogue in the energy sector. And prior to leaving Russia on Saturday, I had discussed much in detail our participation here with President Putin, and I have to tell you that this topic, according to President Putin, is the one that has the best prospects for laying foundation for cooperation between our countries. Also, I'd like to read to you a letter by the chairman of the government of the Russian Federation, who wrote the following address to you. Dear American and Russian colleagues and friends, I pay my compliments to you on the occasion of this important event in the relationship between our two countries, the opening of the first Russian-American Business Energy Forum. Establishing an effective and mutually beneficial cooperation of Russia and the United States in the energy sector has a special significance. The new energy dialogue that has been started by President Vladimir Putin and President George Bush in Moscow in May of this year is called upon not only to bring our economic cooperation to an essentially new level, but also to strengthen the strategic character of the Russian-American partnership. I am convinced that the close bilateral cooperation in the energy sector will promote stability and predictability of the global market of energy carriers, and it will assist in establishing a balance between the interests of the producers and consumers of the energy resources. I also believe that our interaction in the realization of the joint energy investment projects, including those in third countries, is a very promising one. I expect that the Houston Forum, which brings together managers of the leading Russian and American companies in the fuel and energy sector, as well as representatives of the executive and legislative powers of both countries, will assist in broadening of the investment cooperation in reaching large-scale business agreement. I wish your very representative forum success and highest productivity. I am sure that this will be a powerful contribution into the development and strengthening of the economic ties between Russia and the USA, signed by Michael Kasyanov, the Prime Minister. I would like to say also that giving a speech in such an audience makes me think why energy. This room is not too large, and I'm somewhat excited. And then I started thinking, look, how much of production capacity do these people represent? If in Russia, for instance, the total output, domestic output, is taken by the energy to a share of 40%, and if we add the largest American companies, then we can say that this room represents a very substantial share of the world industrial output. That's why we have huge responsibility for the results and outcomes of this meeting. Let me say that the idea of this summit had been brought to our attention by our American colleagues early this year. I have heard it from Don Evans and from Secretary Abrahams, and we started doing some preparatory work without even realizing how much interest will be generated. I told my colleague yesterday that before leaving here, I heard that many Russian major companies were saying that this is an energy summit, but still and well, most likely they will discuss the problems of oil and gas industry. However, it is necessary to widen up this forum and to discuss the power generation and new energy sources such as nuclear energy generation, so that the specialists present here could share their impressions and opinions, to share their know-how, and to make agreements on closer cooperation in the future. And this interest certainly demonstrates that we went in the right direction, and that most likely there will be a lot of positive output from this event. Thus, our interaction is now in the forefront of the Russian business activity, and I am sure that the Russian businessmen will say their word. As for the authorities in Russia, we are fully supportive of the full-scale cooperation, energy cooperation, and the processes that are taking place in Russia right now are such that there is a lot of strengthening of all the macroeconomic signs, criteria, and there is a road to more stable performance. In the last year, we were able to state that the total domestic output grew by 4%, and the industrial production also grew by 4%. So the dynamic features are the same, and the investment volume is also growing. the consumption by the population is also going up, and the commodities turnover will grow by 80%. The population's income will probably grow by 7.5% by the end of the year, and all these economic signs show that at the long last the situation in Russia is stabilizing, and there is an obvious trend to economic growth and more favorable conditions for business activities. Right now, the most relevant issue that is largely debated is that the growth rate that we see in our economy are not sufficient yet. We need to try to achieve higher economic growth, and then the question is how much higher and what could be done in order to accelerate the economic growth. And I have to say that in regard to the sources, the driving factors for higher economic growth, all the opinions seem to be close. Further liberalization, remedying the tax load, further removal of the state organs from the controlling function, further freedom of private enterprising, leveling out conditions of competition, creating more favorable climate for investments, attraction of investments, including the foreign investments, and creating the best environment for any person in the country, for any investor that comes to our country, to fully implement their plans and capabilities, and to make sure that Russia would become a very attractive area for any person that wants to develop a new business, that they would know that there is a comfortable environment for such business activities. And in this connection, I would like to say that we are very serious. It's already for the third year now that we pay a lot of attention to reforming the legal basis for regulatory activities of taxation in the energy sector. We are reforming the energy sector because 2 out of 3 major energy sectors are held by the country, by the government, and are monopolies. This is the Gazprom that has the share of 90% of the total gas output, and the power generation system. Yesterday, my colleague and I discussed our impressions and thoughts, and as it happened, the Energy Secretary, Mr. Abraham, had to go back to Washington because right now they are discussing the energy legislation, and as it happens, we will also have a very difficult week next time, because in Russia they will also discuss in the parliament the energy legislation. So we shared our impressions of these processes, and we discussed the technical aspects of how to implement such a reform, what are the economic and the political problems, and it turns out that they are very close. Role of the regional leaders, because in Russia sometimes they put us under such conditions that are barely acceptable for continuing the reforms in the country. And also the vertical integration of companies, attempts of becoming monopolies in the market. We have to make sure that all producers of energy have adequate access to the infrastructure. And so we are going to study very carefully all the proposals that are currently being prepared in the United States. We are also willing to share our experience, even if limited. And we see that if this legislation package will pass in Russia, then I'm sure during the next summit between our two countries, we would be able to
энергетики, может быть,
talk about the electrical power generation.
сектор,
We would be able to tell you that it is also an open sector, and the liberalization process is going on there, and it would be a very attractive area for investment.
изменение системы налоговой
The second thing is changing the taxation,
системы предоставления прав на
and first and foremost, granting rights for natural resources.
все ключевые вопросы, связанные с этими реформами, обсуждаются с
We agreed that we would be discussing all the key issues with the business community. That is why there is a lot of Russian colleagues from the business community present here. And we had debated with them in detail the law of royalties for the natural resources, and eventually we have agreed on such forms and methods that are acceptable for both for the business community and for the government institutions. Now we have to figure out how to settle the regulatory rights of investors for the subsoil. We want to make it transparent, accessible to all potential investors, so that they would get equal chances to participate in bids for rights to new deposits, to geologic prospecting, in order to make sure that the new owners will be the most efficient ones, that they would be also dealing with prospecting properly. And this is a very relevant problem that will be under discussion in our government in the next 6 months. There are some draft laws or bills already prepared, and they will be discussed in the government and subsequently in the parliament. Our vision is that the key factors are to implement the openness, equal accessibility, and competitiveness when we give out the rights for natural resources. Any actor, from the smallest one to the largest one, have to be in equal rights atmosphere. They have to have an environment where they can equally access those rights. And then we have to depart from the administrative system that is presently still in existence there. Investors have to be able to get maximum guarantees in order to be willing and ready to provide substantial investments into prospecting, opening up those deposits, and building infrastructure. We have a system of issuing licenses. It's already been changed, that it's been augmented by agreements that protect the rights of investors. And our desire is to make sure that it becomes an area of bilateral agreements regulating the relations between the government and an investor, that would guarantee the investor's rights if it is an honest and upright investor, implementing adequate technologies and complying with the documents and regulatory rights, so that such an investor would become independent of the will and power of local authorities. The development of this branch is very dynamic. If the world prices will not jolt and jump too much, then we think we would be able to produce about 390 million tons of oil. This prognosis is being confirmed by our specialists in the oil industry. This is very realistic. It will be implemented, and the growth rate in the next few years after that, the growth rate of the oil output volume would be dependent on the external economic situation, of course, market situation, and on how well will we be able to implement the rights, the legal rights of investors. and guarantee them.
Непростые реформы предстоят у нас.
These reforms are not too simple, and we have to perform this reforming in the gas industry too.
Совместно
Until the end of this year, an intergovernmental group is working together with the Gazprom, and it is preparing a concept on how to reform the gas sector and to create a real free market of gas supplies. Right now we are studying all the possible approaches, the experience of other countries, even though the volume of production and the gas pipeline system is the largest in Russia. There is no comparable system in its size anywhere in the world. So we need to make it transparent, we need to make it competitive, and to create market relations in this sector. One other thing is the product sharing agreement. As you know, the product sharing agreement has been discussed by the parliament, the Duma, and they just passed the most recent document, the procedure for taxation of the product sharing agreements. And we hope that until the end of this year and as the latest in the beginning of the next year, that depends on how intense will the budget be debated in the State Duma, in the parliament. We will be able to wrap up the new legislation, and it will help to accelerate investment into the oil and gas sectors. One other thing I wanted to mention is the pipeline system. In Russia, it is well developed. There is a lot of pipelines, and in order to substantially increase the volume of export from Russia, we need to develop some new aspects. What particular aspects do we need to develop first and foremost is under what conditions will oil be exported? Needs to be told by you. We need inputs from you, including the inputs that we could get from this summit. We are looking for answers on how attractive it is and in what particular aspects do we need to develop our infrastructure in order to make it attractive for further expansion of business. As the government, we will do our best in order to facilitate projects that you would point out as the most attractive, the most efficient, and be sure that they will be supported by the government. This is such aspects as developing export to the market of the United States and to other developing markets. Some of the joint projects with you in the area of production, delivery, and shipping of oil. We have some joint projects already going, and in this respect, the only thing that we need to say is that we look forward to further discussions, to sharing new ideas, and to make further discoveries on how to handle these commercial and economic problems. Let me say that we sincerely hope that by the next meeting of this sort, we would be able to state that some letters of intention, some initial agreements have already been signed between our companies. And we see our task as the following. We, as the least, should not interfere with your work. You have my promise on that. As a maximum, if you ask us for any assistance, we would also try to provide this assistance. This is the political will, and this is the prerequisite for further improving the good relations existing between our countries. I am sure that we would be able to preserve these good relations regardless of what would be the new developments in the economy and politics. those relations that are already in existence will not be broken. We see it on the clarity of contacts between our presidents, other politicians, and technological authorities, such as those represented here in this forum. We will do our best to preserve this comfortable environment, both in the legislative area and in the political aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Greff. Your participation in this Commercial Energy Summit is much more than symbolic. All of us in both the U.S. and Russian energy sectors appreciate your focus on the issues that are so critical to our mutual business interests. Before I introduce our next speaker, I have to ask Gene Lawson if he will proceed to the lobby for an important message. It's a significant event to have the honor this morning to introduce two U.S. Cabinet officers at the same session. In this regard, it's my pleasure now to extend a warm welcome to the Honorable Spencer Abraham, the Secretary of Energy for the United States. President Bush appointed Secretary Abraham in early 2001 after he served in the United States Senate representing the great state of Michigan. Prior to that, the Secretary served as the Chairman of the Michigan Republican Party. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Spencer Abraham.
John, thank you very much. And let me just begin by welcoming everybody here. For me, it's a great pleasure to be back in Houston and to be here with my friend and cabinet colleague, Commerce Secretary Don Evans, along with our friends and counterparts from the Russian Federation, Mr. Greff and Mr. Yusuvov. I think all of us here today appreciate that this summit really takes the energy relationship between the U.S. and Russia to a new level of cooperation and opportunity. And the summit certainly would not have been possible without the initiative and the creativity of Don Evans. Don conceived of this idea. He ensured that it would be a success, and I might add, it's probably not an accident that we're here in Houston to ensure that, but I've had the pleasure of working with Don very closely over the last year and a half, and I have been impressed by his commitment to ensuring greater prosperity around the globe and development of the kind of relationship which is being advanced here today. And so, Don, on behalf of all of us, I just would like to thank you for your leadership in bringing us here together. Thank you very much. I also want to say a special word of thanks to Ministers Yusuvov and Minister Greff. I've had the chance to work closely with both of them. I appreciate their willingness to work very hard to make our relationship a success. I think there is no doubt that they are each deeply committed to strengthening and building the energy sector in Russia, to working with companies from America in that endeavor, and to create the kind of legal structures and atmosphere and certainty and transparency that will allow that to happen. Because Minister Yusuvov and I have similar portfolios, we of course spend a lot of time specifically exploring how we can pursue opportunities in the energy arena. Last year in Moscow, the Minister and I agreed to establish an energy working group, and that group has already produced an impressive array of initiatives. In subsequent meetings, we have established the kind of close working relationship that's really needed to keep things moving forward. And I want to thank you for that relationship. And I also want to thank Minister Greff as well. We have had many occasions to discuss the kinds of work that the future holds for us, and I want to express my optimism that we have an extremely bright future for these endeavors. Indeed, I think the fact that all four of us are here today speaks volumes about those opportunities that lie before us. We've had a lot of occasions over the past year and more to discuss the historic opportunity before us for the U.S. and Russian governments, and especially for U.S. and Russian energy companies to forge closer commercial ties. And here we are today, with you, the people who are making and are going to make the U.S.-Russia Commercial Energy Partnership a reality. So I want to thank all of the participants at this conference for being here. We also owe, I think, a lot of thanks for the success of this first summit, largely to the work and the support of the United States Energy Association, the Baker Institute, and all of the sponsors of these events. And I want to thank them all here at the beginning of my remarks for their contribution to what we hope will be the first of a series of similar events in the months and years ahead. Of course, we're here today because of the groundbreaking work which was done by Presidents Bush and President Putin. It is their vision of a new strategic relationship between our countries that brings us together. They have pledged our two countries to work together on many issues, and that is especially true on a broad array of economic issues, based on the premise that success in this century will depend on respect for the discipline and the practices of the free market. As Presidents Bush and Putin said almost a year ago, an open market economy, the freedom of economic choice, and an open democratic society are the most effective means to provide for the welfare of the citizens of our countries. Underpinning our economic cooperation is the key element of energy. The emphasis that our presidents place on the development of energy cooperation between our two countries and our many companies offers the promise of a very bright future. It is based on partnership for the development not just of Russia's vast untapped energy resources, but on cooperation in energy projects of all kinds in both countries and throughout the world. So as we look ahead, we recognize that we confront major challenges, both here in the United States and in other parts of the world in the energy arena. The challenges of energy security and environmentally responsible economic development enter into every calculation of every nation. In the United States, President Bush, in one of his very first acts as president, as you all know, directed a number of members of the cabinet to work with Vice President Cheney to develop an energy plan, which was released in May of 2001. The key premises of our policy are more efficient use of energy, a modern and expanded national energy infrastructure, and a diverse and balanced energy portfolio. And in that sense, we emphasized in our plan the need for us to diversify the sources of supply for the U.S. energy market and its needs. That meant more trading partnerships and working with countries such as the Russian Federation more closely to expand the opportunities for imports as well as for mutual projects. It includes oil and natural gas, nuclear power, conventional renewable energy sources such as hydropower, and newer sources such as solar and wind energy. We also looked to the long term, the period after the year 2020, and we made proposals that reflect a strong commitment to research and development now that will enable us to provide our citizens with clean, abundant, and affordable energy for generations to come. Earlier this year, Minister Yusuvov provided me with a copy of the then recently completed Russian energy plan. Though there are differences in emphasis just because of the natural differences between nations, I was struck by how many similarities there are in the approach. And as Minister Greff indicated just a few minutes ago, we are both on the verge of working toward the completion of energy legislation to try to even more effectively address the energy challenges we face. I believe the similarities we have will provide many opportunities for increased trade, investment, and cooperation between our two countries. If we're to succeed at this large task, the governments of the United States and Russia do have an important role to play. Our job is to create the framework of laws and rules that will allow our companies to form partnerships with confidence in the security of their arrangements and to operate in a competitive market and a free trade environment. When I visited Moscow last July for a series of meetings on energy issues, I had the opportunity to participate in roundtable discussions with representatives from both American and Russian energy companies and to hear their concerns firsthand. In fact, a number of people I met with are here at this summit. Interestingly, the participants, whether American or Russian, voiced the same concerns over and over. Everyone, Russian and American alike, emphasized the need for a sturdy, predictable investment framework that ensures sanctity of contracts, clear tax regulation, and complementary regulatory policies. Working together, I firmly believe we can achieve that framework for investment and opportunity. The rest is then up to you, the individuals, the organizations, the visionaries, the entrepreneurs, the investors, the scientists, the engineers, managers, and the dedicated workers who tackled the tough job of developing energy resources, building infrastructure, conserving the environment, and preparing for the energy future. Looking back over the last decade, our two governments have worked together for the creation of a stable, reliable framework for international energy commerce and for the development of the energy potential of our two countries. And our companies have worked together, learning firsthand what was needed to form successful partnerships for large energy projects. That initiative has produced a number of successes, especially in the last 12 to 24 months. On the exploration and production side, as everyone knows, the Sakhalin-1 project is being developed by a consortium of U.S., Russian, Japanese, and Indian companies led by ExxonMobil. With a projected outlay of as much as $15 billion over multiple phases, that project represents the largest direct foreign investment in Russia. And last year I was in Russia for the opening of the CPC pipeline, which today carries 400,000 barrels a day of oil from Kazakhstan's oil fields across Russia to a deepwater port on the Black Sea. That pipeline, which has 11 international partners, will eventually reach a capacity, as many of you know, of over 1 million barrels of oil per day. And it represents an enormous investment in a project that required more than mere bilateral cooperation. In fact, if we ever needed proof that the U.S. and Russia can work together and with other countries to make complex projects work, I think the CPC is that proof. Our sessions at this summit are concentrating on the essentials of our cooperative commercial effort: energy market opportunities, financing issues, technology advances, and education and training needs. I'd just like to highlight a couple of them before I conclude. The first point is the role of advanced technology. Advanced technology makes environmentally responsible energy projects possible. Advanced technology allows us to produce more, explore opportunities with greater success, and solve challenges posed by the entire spectrum of activities associated with the production and the delivery of energy. Some of you have taken the opportunity to visit our company's local facilities and labs to see the technology firsthand. I'm sure you're as impressed as I've been by the capability of those companies to develop energy resources economically under virtually any conditions. I would suggest that advanced technology offers an important, if not the most important, arena for increased trade investment and cooperation. Under our Energy Working Group, announced by the presidents at their summit this past summer, we see additional opportunities for technology exchange in the areas of Arctic production technologies, gas flaring and gas hydrates, opportunities for expanded exchange programs to enhance data collection and analysis, and opportunities to exchange ideas and technology on increased energy efficiency. Second point I'd like to make is that with privatization, the Russian energy sector today is playing a growing and ever more important role in international markets. It's a very positive development for potential business partners, for the international energy world as Russia emerges as a strong new business competitor, and for Russia itself. This increasingly means that opportunities for increased cooperation will be present in not only our two countries, but in many others as well. Government clearly has a role to play, but it is the private sector that must calculate the risks and reap the rewards of this new era in U.S.-Russian commercial energy collaboration. The American and Russian people separately created two of the largest energy sectors in the world in the last century. Imagine what we'll be able to achieve working together in this new century. We believe this first commercial energy summit is an important step toward reaching the ambitious goals we all share. And so in closing, I would just like to congratulate all of those who have made this summit possible. But more importantly, I want to convey a message to all of the participants. We see this as the starting point of a very ambitious effort to bring people together. The possibilities that I've outlined and that my other colleagues have outlined here today. We're very optimistic about those possibilities. We encourage you to take advantage of this summit so that we can move together towards success in the future. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you, Secretary Abraham. This is a challenging time with our Congress striving to pass comprehensive national energy legislation. We appreciate your continued leadership and thank you for being with us today. And now I want to note really a terrifically special honor to introduce not only 2 U.S. secretaries, but also 2 Russian ministers in the same session. In this regard, our next address is from His Excellency, the Honorable Igor K. Yusupov, Minister of Energy for the Russian Federation. The minister took office in 2001. Prior to his taking this position, he served in various capacities in the government. He began his career as an engineer with Mosenergo, the electric utility serving the city of Russia. Please join me in welcoming Minister Yusupov.
Господина министра Игоря Юсупова. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Secretary Evans, Mr. Secretary Abraham, and dear organizers, we would like, on behalf of the Russian delegation, to join in our appreciation, which were noted by my colleague, Mr. Gref. I'd like to thank all the people who were involved in putting together this first U.S.-Russia Commercial Energy Summit, for this warm atmosphere, for the wonderful reception we are enjoying here. And I hope that this spirit will prevail during the business negotiations between our companies. As my colleague, Secretary Abraham, mentioned, just this year alone, we had 4 meetings between ourselves, and it was acting on his proposal. That's where we introduced new members representing commercial private businesses into our intergovernment working group, because those commercial interests, they introduce the great concerns about the mutual commercial interests, the same way as Mr. Gref pointed out, that we, government officials, at least do no harm, if not facilitate those proposals. So once again, I would like to greet and welcome all of our participants from behalf of the Russian delegation. My colleagues, Mr. Abraham and Mr. Gref, already indicated that this dialogue between Russia and the United States became possible because of the warm personal relationship between leaders of our 2 countries, President Bush and President Putin, who adopted a joint declaration on energy dialogue between Russia and the United States. And indeed, this dialogue can be very successful, and the first results already being produced. And it can further facilitate more enhanced cooperation between our countries. And therefore, this first Commercial Energy Summit is supposed to facilitate investors' activities, those who are already ready to invest into the Russian energy sector, and to open opportunities for Russian companies' entry to United States financial markets, and to set up framework agreement for mutually beneficial cooperation in energy business. I believe that the interests of our countries can be best served in such areas as further development of legislation and regulatory framework in those areas. For example, me and Secretary Abraham exchanged our energy or draft energy policies. And as it was being already indicated, there's a great deal of similarity between those 2 documents, and they even complement each other in a certain extent, because we do have some undeveloped resources in Russian Federation can become very good and very reliable source of energy supplies for the United States. Those documents also indicated a number of avenues for cooperation in the areas of reforming and restructuring national energy industries, provide opportunities for large-scale investment projects involving American businesses, and also opening possibility for such projects as Secretary Minister Gref already indicated in other countries of the world. We both are committed to introducing environmentally friendly technologies in coal industry, and we're ready to get acquainted with the experience of American companies and try to bring some of the relevant technologies into Russian Federation. United States, as been already indicated here, is one of the world's largest importer of energy resources, although Russia is one of the world's largest exporters. Russia controls about a third of world's natural gas, approximately 1/6 of the world coal reserves, and in the year 2002, the same way as last year, we have a rather rapid development of oil development. For example, last year it was a 7% increase, and we anticipate that in the year 2002 we will be able to maintain the same growth rates. Oil production in Russia involves over 200 companies. Approximately 90% of Russian oil is being produced by 10 vertically integrated amalgamations. We have 348 million tons being produced. This year, I think that number will be increased by additional 30 million tons. As Mr. Gref indicated, we might reach the benchmark of 390 million tons annually, like within the next few years. And this increase was primarily produced by a new investment and introduction of new technologies in those things. More than half of the undeveloped resources still are in the remote areas of the Russian Federation, some of them above the polar circle. So in order to be able to carry out this forecast, Russian oil industry, as being indicated by Secretary Evans, will need approximately $1 billion annually. And our estimates are pretty much in line with this forecast. And before the year 2010, total volume of investment in the Russian oil industry can exceed $50 billion. Natural gas development in Russia is pretty much controlled by the Gazprom company. It has about 90% of the industry, and 10% is produced by independent producers. And, for example, therefore, last year we produced 580 million cubic meters, and the forecast for this year calls for 3% increase, and therefore the total volume will exceed 600 million. Currently, we export more than 130 million cubic meters annually, and with the putting online the new gas pipeline, this export can be increased by 40%. Looking at the forecast for the demand side, both internationally and domestically, there is a possibility that by the year 2010, Russia will produce approximately 650 million cubic meters, and according to the strategic plan of gas development for the year 2020, that volume can reach 700 million cubic meters. Strategically, we're looking at the Yamal region, which will provide necessary resources for the long-term perspective. So Yamal fields developments and offshore fields in northern seas will require investments which will be compatible to investments required to develop Alaskan oil and gas fields. So the operating of existing fields and operating fields with the difficult resources will require major renovation in the industry, which in turn will require substantial investments. And I think here is an opportunity to involve advanced technology which being developed in the United States, and that will be most timely opportunity to use this technology to adjust and modernize Russian industry. the rate of development and the exports of Russian oil and gas resources is primarily dependent on the infrastructure resources. Currently, all the increase is primarily developed at the traditional areas such as Western Siberia, Volga region, Pechora region, and some Far East and Eastern Siberia regions. But existing infrastructure and lack of deep-sea ports in the Russian Federation somewhat curtail export capability of the Russian Federation. And I believe that my colleague, Minister Gref, touched upon this situation in his presentation. And the lack of this infrastructure on the eastern border of Russia somewhat slows down the development of very promising oil and gas fields in that area, because those ones, they can heavily contribute to increase exports to western coast of the United States and to some other countries of Pacific region. So domestic consumption also puts additional pressure on infrastructure and development and further development of fields, especially in Kazakhstan, also put additional pressure on Russian infrastructure. As a result, a new policy on developing major pipeline provides for modernizing the existing situation and looking for better, more efficient ways of transporting petrochemical resources. So we're working to get access to other deep-sea ports, and simultaneously, when we're designing new transport routes, Russia is going to anticipate international shipments, and will anticipate not only oil and gas shipments, but also petrochemical products as well. Russia supports an idea of multivariant transportation of petrochemical resources, striving to achieve environmental safety and efficiency, supports the idea of removing political aspect from selecting the particular transportation routes. Russia reinforces and would like to restate that it is committed to increasing supplies to American markets. And I believe that the major success accomplished in providing political stability in the Russian Federation makes it a reliable partner for the United States. As being already indicated, our needs have a lot of similar, and the policies, energy development policies in the United States have a lot of similarities, and successful implementation of those policies will require in-depth and productive dialogue between our companies in both countries. Therefore, studying and evaluation of American experience in operating those companies and evaluating the fields will become very important issue for cooperation between our countries. The key element for Russian-American cooperation will be in the investment sphere. Minister Gref already helped me in my mission because he provided the in-depth analysis of economic situation in the Russian Federation in terms of creating legislative framework and what is done to create the most favorable investment climate in the country. So today we are talking about some success stories, such projects as the project on the Sakhalin Island and the CPC pipeline consortium. And at the same time, we are happy to see that the Russian companies are more successful in getting access to American financial markets, which is a key illustration of the partnership arrangements existing and strengthening between our countries. Another promising area is the increased investment flow in the small and medium companies in the Russian Federation. At this point, it is difficult to overestimate the benefits from advanced technologies such as environmentally friendly technologies in coal areas and several others. So in compliance with the energy policy or energy strategy of the Russian Federation up to the period of 2020, we are committed to switching Russian domestic economy to the most energy efficient things, such as involving the renewable sources of energy, which opens additional venues for additional investments and advanced technologies. Russian government is committed to establishing most favorable investment climate, which has been indicated before. So the amendments on the subsoil law and the PSA legislation will make Russian projects even more beneficial and attractive. I believe that Russian projects will become more attractive by adopting international accounting and financial standards, which will make those financial statements of Russian partners more understandable and more attractive to our portfolio investment. One of the key factors to contributing to this investment attractiveness is the stable growth of domestic economy. So I believe that the closer cooperation between our financial institutions will contribute to increased business activity on our markets and in the new markets in other countries. And in conclusion, I would like to point out that during those 2 days, during our section meetings, many of our companies will present their plans, strategies, and intentions, which they would like to start in Russia, including development of new oil and gas fields, including development of new infrastructure and transportation facilities. And I think that if we, within the framework of this energy summit, can indicate the possibility of hosting the next summit next year in the Russian Federation, I think by that time we will be able to come up with the evaluation of some of the specific projects, bilateral projects, which are going on the way, and some of the bilateral projects which we can undertake elsewhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Yusufov, for your outstanding comments. Your statements are a sincere reflection of both the opportunities and the challenges ahead. I again would like to thank all 4 secretaries and ministers for their outstanding comments, common themes around stability, security, and diversity, giving us lots to think about and setting the stage for what I'm confident will be an extremely meaningful energy summit. We'll now have a short break and reconvene at 10:30. Thank you.